Pacific Oaks College is located in an urban setting in the city of Pasadena in Los Angeles County. Much like the Southern California region, Pasadena residents are racially, ethnically, and economically diverse. In 2019, Dr. Jack Pedunton was named president of Pacific Oaks College. He developed a committee to research the feasibility of meeting the eligibility requirement and apply to the Department of Education for a Hispanic Serving Institution grant. Pacific Oaks College applied with a 48.7% of its total undergraduate student population as Latinx above the 25% eligibility requirement. In October 2020, Pacific Oaks was awarded a U.S. Department of Education Title V grant, providing a $2.5 million across 5 years. These funds allowed us to implement a wide range of services to academically support our students' retention to graduation and thrive during their college experience. Students benefit from a dedicated undergraduate success center with a lending library of books and laptops, complimentary bilingual tutoring service, academic advising, a speakers series to share the backstory and successes based on a foundation of higher education of Latinx. This podcast series is part of our HSI Grants educational outreach to raise awareness of the value and importance of higher education degree attainment within the Latino community. The podcast will provide you with information on how to begin your college dream. You'll learn about financial aid in completing the FOFSA, aligning your interest with a college degree program, the application process, and what campus resources are available to you. We will share motivating stories from local Latinos who have overcome challenges and earned their college degree as the foundation for their success. You will also hear from faculty and alumni who are there to support you as a student to strive and excel, becoming self-sufficient and successful.
Welcome to Pacific Oaks College Hispanic Serving Institution Podcast. Tu sueño, tu realidad. I'm here with Seph Rodriguez, Associate Director of Financial Aid. I'm going to review the process by which students can apply for programs to assist in paying for college. Welcome to the podcast, Seph.
Well, I appreciate you having me. Financial aid is important for students to attend college because not everyone can necessarily afford out-of-pocket expense for college. In today's college expenses, it can get extremely expensive on how to pay for school. So one of the things we always want students to understand is that they don't necessarily have to pay cash to go to school, and financially plays a huge factor in their ability to further their education.
So how can I pay for college?
Well, there's a variety of ways. There are those students who can actually pay for it out of pocket, but the majority of students are not able to do that. So whether it be state funding, institutional funding, or federal funding, there's a variety of financial aid options out there, such as student loans, Pell Grant, the Cal Grant, which is a state grant. There's scholarships, both institutional and outside scholarships. So there is an actual variety of ways to actually pay for school.
You mentioned grants and you mentioned Pell Grants and Cal Grants. So what are those?
Pell Grants and Cal Grants are fund sources that, if eligible, a student can receive to pay for school that they don't necessarily have to pay back. So unlike loans, which you do have to pay back, the Pell Grant you don't, and the Cal Grant you don't. But the distinct difference between the two is the Pell Grant is a federal grant offered to all undergraduate students that are eligible, and the Cal Grant is specific to California students California undergrad students who are actually eligible.
So what do I have to do in order to qualify to these grants?
Excellent question. The first thing you want to do is complete the free application for federal student aid, also known or better known as the FAFSA. In doing so, you're creating a profile for yourself for the Department of Education, and you're determining your need. It basically determines your family size, your income information, and based on all those criteria, the Department of Education creates what we call an expected family contribution. That number determines a need, and that need determines the amount of Pell Grant that a student would be eligible for. And then the state of California also has their methods for determining the Cal Grant.
So what happens if I don't qualify for any of those grants? Will be using financial aid my best option? What happens if I don't know much about financial aid?
Well, the beautiful thing about if you're not eligible for grants, the Department of Education also offers student loan options. And the great thing about the Department of Education student loan option is that they have what they call guarantee loans, meaning that ultimately they're not looking at a student's credit eligibility, they're not looking at their job or their income. For the most part, if a student's not eligible for any grants and they are in good standings with the Department of Education, they can apply for student loans, which again are guaranteed student loans.
So I heard how students have huge financial aid debt after college. How can we avoid that?
That is true, and part of our responsibility is to make sure that we educate students to understand their student loans. So the first thing is understand exactly what you're borrowing. The Department of Education actually requires the students to take an entrance counseling, which basically identifies all the things that students need to know about taking loans. That's a requirement. And then beyond that, just understanding the loan process, making sure that you know how much you're borrowing, and it's recommended that you only necessarily borrow what you need. If you don't necessarily need the funds, don't necessarily borrow more than what you need.
Are there any sort of support or advice to learn or to know how to apply or how to realize how much to have to get on these loans?
Absolutely. In most cases, and in our case, we're going to award a student at what we call their maximum eligibility. So we're going to award them at the most that they can actually borrow. Mm-hmm. However, we also offer counseling and letting the student know the student has the option to either accept that amount at its highest level, or they can actually adjust it, or they can decline it. And if they wanted to know exactly what they needed, if they were looking to borrow exactly what they need, then they can contact the school and we can kind of work with them with their tuition, let them know what their tuition is, and match that to what they actually would want to borrow.
How do I apply for financial aid?
Well, the first thing is you're going to want to complete the FAFSA. That's on studentaid.gov. The beautiful thing about that website is it's a one-stop shop. You would go on that site, you complete the FAFSA, determine, and based on if you were looking to take out loans, all the loan documentation, the master promissory note, which is a fancy way of saying loan application, the entrance counseling, it's all right there in one spot. Beyond that, our financial aid department actually reaches out to the students and gives them instructions through the entire process. And even if they wanted to actually come to the campus and sit at a computer, we would actually sit with them and help them fill out those documents.
Can I apply also for a scholarship?
Absolutely. There's a variety of scholarships that students can apply for. In some cases, the Pacific Oaks actually offers institutional scholarships. There's also donor scholarships. In some cases, those are from past grads. And then there's also sites like the FastWeb website where students can create a profile of themselves on the site, and the site would match scholarships to that profile and let them know what scholarships that they're eligible for. Also with Pacific Oaks, we are partnered with I3, who has a website called Ion Tuition. And this particular site and this agency offers a scholarship search as well. It's a free service. All students have to do is log in and sign up, and they'll have access to that scholarship search.
What are important things to remember as I apply to pay for college?
Well, know what your tuition is. It's important to, again, in the cases of financial aid, we award at maximum eligibility, but it's important to know what your tuition is because that way you can determine whether or not you want to borrow just what you need or do you want to borrow excess. And keep in mind, especially when it is to loans, know your loans, understand what your options are, understand what it means to borrow a loan, and ask questions. I mean, that's the best advice I can give anybody. If you don't know, ask. We're available for that anytime a student wants to ask a question.
In your experience, where's the step where the students struggle the most when they're trying to get a financial aid or grants or loans?
I think in the most part, it's just the intimidation of the process in general. When you're looking at a situation and you see school is, a few $1,000s, the first thought comes to mind is where am I going to get this money, and how do I go about applying for it? So I think that's probably the biggest challenge is just kind of getting over that hurdle of the idea that you can apply for financial aid, that there are options for you, and our job is to explain those options, or at least let the students know that those options exist, and walk them through those processes. And I think once they get past it in their first year, the first time they do it, it kind of becomes relatively easy at that point because we're showing them that it really isn't that difficult, that there are funds available out there for students either through grants or the guaranteed loans or scholarships.
What can you tell to a student that maybe has some fear regarding getting into debt, to complete education? What would you say to them?
Well, yeah, the beautiful thing about the debt piece, it's going to be there. It's a loan. It's just the nature of the beast, unfortunately. However, again, without it, most students wouldn't be able to go to school. The fear that they would need to get over is that, again, if you manage your student loan debt, you can get through this very easily. And then the Department of Education also makes it extremely easy by offering the students multiple different repayment options, and those options would fit that student's budget. They get to choose ultimately how they pay their loan back, and based on those, and they make those decisions based on their personal experience. So it's not a cut and dry, just, everybody makes the same payment from this point forward. You kind of go in there, you see what the options are, you see what option works best for you, and then you choose that option.
Has a process changed due to COVID or pandemic?
The only thing that really changed with the COVID is the Department of Education has made it actually a little bit easier to apply for aid. The numbers and everything as far as how you receive the aid, that all remains the same. But just to give you one quick example, they changed the verification process in terms of verifying the student's income. They basically wiped stuff like that out. So they've taken small steps out of the process to make it just a little bit easier for the students.
What's the first things that they have to do in terms of documentation? So what's the first thing that they have to do to get ready?
Well, the first thing from a technical standpoint is make sure you complete that FAFSA. That's the end all be all.
So FAFSA is the main.
That's the absolute. That's the point where the student is letting the Department of Education know that they want financial aid. But I would take it a step further. I would say contact your financial aid office and find out exactly. Make sure you get all your questions answered and get that guidance that's necessary. To actually apply for the FAFSA. So we would actually review the steps. First of all, answer all the questions, kind of get them over those fears, if you will, and then put them on that path that actually starts with the FAFSA. Our process is we take the students step by step, and even if they're not reaching out to us, we're reaching out to them, and we're literally reaching out to them on a weekly basis through that entire financial aid process until we get it complete.
So if we think about it, it's not that overwhelming. You just have the information ready, know what you want to do, how much you want to ask, how much do you need, and start the process, right?
I agree. I think the most overwhelming thing is thinking that it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
I just that whole concept of where am I going to get these funds from? This whole concept of how do I get this ball rolling? But once we get them started and we kind of show them that it's not really that challenging, it's actually fairly simple.
So you were talking about family contribution, right? And can you explain a little bit about more what it is and how it works in terms of the getting the grant or the application together?
Sure. The expected family contribution is something that once a student completes a FAFSA, it all comes down to that one number, that expected family contribution number, where the Department of Education is weighing all the data that's inputted on that, and they're permeating that number. That number, there's a lot of factors, but it generally looks at how much a student makes versus their family size versus the number of students that are actually going to college. And when there's a formula that they create that based on those figures will create that number. So, for example, if you have a family of 5, you're looking at it, and they're making, say, for example, $10,000 versus a family of 5 that's making $100,000. That's where this kind of just a very small example of how they're going to determine the student who has a family of 5 with $10,000 is going to have a higher need versus the family of 5 with $100,000, and that's where that EFC comes from. And based on that number, that's where that's where the school determines where the student's Pell eligibility is.
Now, when we talk about how much the family makes, we're talking mom and dad. Does he also include brothers, sisters, siblings that also work, or just dad, mom, and the student?
That's an excellent question. If the student's married, it's looking at the student's spouse and family. If the student is a dependent student, they're looking at parents and basically dependents. So, again, you could have folks that live in your household that you wouldn't count in this number if you're not necessarily supporting them by 50% or more of your income. But yes, they're looking at dependents, and you could have grandma living in the house, and as long as you can show that you're paying 50% of her livelihood, you could count her as a dependent.
Okay. When you are creating when you have to create a profile in FAFWeb, so how deeply you need to go in terms of information that you need to put in that profile?
Well, there is going to be a series of questions that the student will answer when they're creating their profile in the FAFSA. But in generally, they're trying to some degree, narrow down very specific situation for the student. So, for example, a single parent. In some cases, there are scholarships that are specific to certain ethnicities and a bunch of different varieties of things. So when a student goes in there and answers all those questions, say, for example, using a single parent as an example, that's in their profile, and the site starts looking for scholarships that are specific or relative to single parenting. And there's just a bunch of different types of questions in that regard. And now you have all these questions answered. This is who I am. And the site goes out there and finds scholarships that are looking for specific things that match your profile.
Okay. Also, you mentioned about a I-3 form, right?
Yes, the I3 is a company that has a website called Ion Tuition. I3 is partnered with Pacific Oaks, so this is not necessarily out there for everybody, but it's certainly out there for Pacific Oaks students, where they offer the website Ion Tuition. It does a lot of things for the students. But from the perspective of scholarships, they do have a scholarship search. It is not as detailed as the FastWeb. You're not necessarily creating a profile there. You're just going out there and looking at just all these scholarships that are out there. What's important about these two sites, and what students need to understand, is there are a bazillion scholarship sites out there, and I hate to say it, but there's a lot of scam sites out there.
Okay.
So we always advise students, if they're asking you to pay for anything, or don't use it. Use the FAST website that's secured, it's free. And then when it comes to I3 and their site, their Ion Tuition, Pacific Oaks has vetted that company, and they are trusted. So we ask students to be careful when they're out there looking for scholarship websites. These two sites are the best ones, and they are secure. My biggest thing with students, we tell them all the time, do not let money be the reason that you do not start school. There are so many options out there, from the scholarships to the grants, even federal work study, for example, guaranteed loans. You can find the funds to pay for school. It's just a matter of reaching out to us and finding out what your options are. Worst case scenario, fill out your FAFSA. Once you fill out your FAFSA, turn that into your school. We'll take it from there. There is something that we could do to help you pay for school. So again, my message would be, don't let the fear of money be the reason that you don't start school. There is something out there for you. Let's get out there, let's get our education, and let's move forward with our lives.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
In our next episode.
When we say that our core values are diversity, respect, inclusion, and social justice, those aren't just words for us at Pacific Oaks. It's what we really believe in. Certainly our president supports this as well.
Michael Payton will talk about a Steps to Academic Success program at Pacific Oaks College.